Gardeners are taught to obsess over NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, because these three numbers dominate every fertilizer bag on the shelf. But anyone who has gardened long enough eventually discovers a hard truth. NPK alone can only take a garden so far. You can feed your plants endlessly and still end up with pale leaves, weak stems, inconsistent fruiting, low flavor, or poor disease resistance. The missing link isn't more fertilizer. It's the 5 hidden minerals that plants desperately need, but modern soils rarely contain in adequate amounts. Long before synthetic fertilizers existed, indigenous growers, traditional farmers, and old-world gardeners maintained exceptional harvests because their soils were naturally rich in these trace minerals. Today, decades of tilling, leaching, and over-fertilization have stripped them away. When you restore them, slowly, gently, and in the right ratios, your garden shifts almost overnight. Growth becomes deeper, sturdier, more resilient. Leaves darken. Fruits intensify in flavor. Herbs become more aromatic. Roots explore soil that once felt lifeless. And yes, harvest volume increases dramatically because plants are no longer starving for the micronutrients that control their most fundamental processes. Below are the 5 hidden minerals that change everything, and why fertilizer alone will never supply them in the forms your plants actually need. Let's start with calcium, the mineral that really acts as your plant's internal architect. Calcium actually determines how every single cell wall is built. Without enough calcium, stems tend to flop, fruits can crack, roots just fail to branch, and leaves might turn yellow, even if there's plenty of nitrogen available. Most fertilizers, contain almost none of it. And even when they do, the form is often just not available to plants because calcium really needs the right soil biology and a proper pH range to stay soluble. Gardeners often think of blossom end rot in tomatoes, peppers, and squash as just a water problem, but in reality, it's calcium deficiency combined with erratic uptake. Restoring calcium isn't as simple as just adding lime. Sometimes, in fact, lime can make the issue worse by shifting the pH too far. What makes the biggest difference is a slow-release natural source like crushed eggshells, ground oyster shell, gypsum, or even finely crushed bones. These sources release calcium steadily over months, supporting fruiting plants throughout their entire growth window. You'll want to mix small amounts into the top few inches of soil or just side dress along rows. No dumping, no shock dosing, just steady, architecture-building nourishment for your plants. Add magnesium, the hidden force behind deep green leaves and strong flavors. Magnesium sits at the center of every chlorophyll molecule. When it's missing, plants can't capture sunlight efficiently. This leads to pale leaves, slow growth, and weak flavor in herbs and vegetables. A magnesium-deficient bed often looks nitrogen-starved, even when nitrogen is abundant. Epsom salt is the quick fix, but not the best long-term strategy. A better approach is natural magnesium from dolomitic lime if you've got acidic soils, or langbeinite for neutral soils. These deliver magnesium alongside trace sulfur and potassium, supporting photosynthesis and enzymatic reactions without causing imbalances. When magnesium is restored, plants begin pumping out sugars and oils at a higher rate, which is why herbs become more aromatic and fruits become sweeter. Now, let's talk about sulfur, the mineral that truly unlocks flavor, aroma, and even disease resistance in your plants. Sulfur used to be far more common in soils because rainfall would carry it down from volcanic and industrial emissions. But with modern air standards, atmospheric sulfur has dropped, which is definitely good for us humans. But it does mean that soils are now a bit starved for it. Plants really need sulfur for protein formation, enzyme activation, and of course the creation of those lovely essential oils. If you've ever wondered why these days store-bought onions, garlic and brassicas just don't have that strong taste they once had, well, sulfur deficiency is often the reason. Gypsum, elemental sulfur and langbeinite are excellent natural sources, by the way, and you'll notice that herbs like chives, sage, oregano and mustard greens respond almost instantly once sulfur is replenished. The same goes for cabbage family crops, which rely quite heavily on sulfur-based compounds for both pest resistance and that rich, unmistakable flavor. Restore boron, the mineral responsible for flowering fruit set and sugar transport. Boron is needed in tiny amounts, but it is essential for reproduction and carbohydrate movement within the plant. Without it, flowers fail to open properly, pollen becomes non-viable, fruiting is irregular, and root tips die back. Many gardeners mistake boron deficiency for poor pollination or weak genetics. The key with boron is, well, caution. Too much is toxic. Too little weakens production. Natural sources include borax used at extremely diluted rates. A common safe mix is 1 teaspoon of borax dissolved in 1 gallon of water, applied over a 10 by 10 foot area once per season. For organic gardeners, composted seaweed is a gentler alternative, delivering microdoses without risk of over-application. Rebuild your soil with zinc, the mineral that regulates growth hormones and immune strength. Zinc deficiency is incredibly widespread, especially in sandy or heavily worked soils. Plants depend on zinc to synthesize growth hormones, maintain membrane integrity, and defend themselves against environmental stress. A zinc-deficient plant, well, it tends to grow slowly, and you'll often notice it produces small or even misshapen leaves. Plus, it can really struggle with cold sensitivity and, unfortunately, become more prone to fungal issues. These days, modern fertilizers rarely include zinc, mainly because it works in such tiny trace amounts. For zinc to remain available to plants, it actually needs to be tied to organic matter or humic acids. The easiest natural fix is kelp meal or seaweed extract. Both contain bioavailable zinc, along with, dozens of trace elements that support the plant's immune system. Hidden minerals matter because they turn soil into a living system, not a feeding schedule. Fertilizer forces growth. Minerals enable it. Once these 5 hidden minerals are reintroduced, plants begin operating at their full biological potential. Fertilizer becomes supplemental rather than essential, soil retains nutrients more effectively, the garden becomes more resilient, more flavorful, and, honestly, more productive. What surprises most gardeners is how little of these minerals it takes to transform a bed. You don't need to dump amendments, you just need balance. Over a single season, plants become noticeably stronger. Over multiple seasons, your garden becomes a self-sustaining ecosystem. If you want more deep, practical soil knowledge like this, just say the word. There's a whole world of hidden mineral science that home gardeners deserve to use.